We have a lot of news from the NHL waiver wire today. We have a claim from yesterday and several new players on waivers today. Some fairly substantial names. We'll discuss the latest coming up next. So welcome back to another video here at Top Shelf Hockey. Now, as I mentioned, today's video is all about the NHL waiver wire news that came down this morning. Now, of course, yesterday we only had one player, and he actually was claimed. The first claim we've had in a few weeks here. But yesterday, the Coyotes had placed forward Drake Cagguila on waivers, and he was claimed by the Buffalo Sabres. So Drake Cagguila now switches over to Buffalo. He's, of course, on a one-year expiring contract, league minimum. Of course, he was previously with the Oilers and the Blackhawks, an undrafted player who got signed by Edmonton, went through his entry-level deal, ended up going over to the Blackhawks, didn't get qualified as an RFA, ended up in Arizona where things didn't really work out. So I guess the Sabres have a option here where they've looking to make some trades ahead of the deadline, so they're likely going to be in need of a few roster players, and he can see if he can make a go of it there just to kind of, I guess set himself up if possible to get a contract for next year and beyond, because obviously he hasn't had a great season. So we'll see what happens for Cagguila in Buffalo, but lots of other names on waivers today and some pretty interesting ones as well. Let's start with the Montreal Canadiens. Again, putting Paul Byron on waivers. Now, of course, Byron didn't have to go on waivers today, but if he didn't do it today, he likely would have ended up on waivers probably on Sunday, which would have put us really close to the deadline on Monday. So it's just easier to get this out of the way now if you're Marc Bergevin. That way, in case there is a claim and your roster is not what you're expecting it to be, you have a little bit more time to react and replace and decide what you're going to do that way. But obviously, this is really the only purpose here is to be able to put him on the taxi squad in between games and have some roster flexibility, which is what they've been doing all season, which is the kind of the theme of the season here for many teams. But obviously Byron probably doesn't get claimed given the contract that he's making, but still you never know, because obviously when you're on waivers and you clear, you can still come up and play, but you can play 10 games or 30 days, whatever comes first, before you have to go through it again to be reassigned. He's only at 9 games. He doesn't have to. He could play one more before they have to do this, but like I said, it puts it too close to the deadline and just could impact their plans there. So obviously they have to do this now. So we'll see what happens with Paul Byron. I'm sure the Habs don't want to lose him, but the other thing as well is if they did include him in a trade, for example, ahead of the deadline, because we know there's rumors that Bergevin likely makes another move or so, that the acquiring team would already have him cleared through waivers and they'd have that flexibility that comes with it too. So there is that, makes him a little bit more of a tradable asset, but doesn't mean that's going to happen by any means. Now we also have Kyle Turris on waivers from the Edmonton Oilers. Things have really gone downhill for Turris really ever since leaving Ottawa a few years ago. I went to Nashville on a 6-year, $6 million per year contract. Things didn't really work out there after a couple of years. He gets bought out, ends up going to Edmonton, which looked like a really sweet, great fit, a good deal. They got him at $1.6 million for 2 years. Really to be like a third line center behind McDavid, Draisaitl, or Nuge, depending on how they're doing their lineup on any given night. And he really hasn't lived up to expectations there. And I've mentioned in other videos that if the Oilers are looking to do something ahead of the deadline, it's rumored that they want to kind of have that right shot third line center, which is what they thought they were getting in Kyle Turris. And then it wouldn't be surprising if they tried to include him in a trade to free up the space to do it. So, of course, if he clears waivers, then the acquiring team, again, will have that flexibility that he just went through the waiver wire. So there's that. Or maybe he gets picked up where he has another year on his term and hasn't been playing the greatest. Probably doubtful, but then again, you just never know. The waiver wire has been a little bit unpredictable this year and a whole different beast. So we'll see what happens, but I wouldn't be surprised if Turris does end up possibly changing teams, but more likely through trade after he clears would be my guess. But like I said, hard to say with any kind of certainty here. Now we also have Kenneth Appleby with the New York Islanders. Now he is going through waivers because he's getting signed to a new contract and requires waivers for that purpose. So he's been already playing a few games for the American Hockey League affiliate in Bridgeport for the Sound Tigers, but he needs waivers to get his NHL contract to be official. So obviously he's been a guy that's been around for a little while. He played 3 NHL games with the Devils in the past, had a pretty solid junior career in Oshawa in the OHL. His 3 games, his 3 appearances that he played with the Devils were all really good. Like, look at the stats, they're pretty solid. I believe he only gave up 3 goals. They were not all starts though, so there was not a full 60 minutes in each appearance. So limited amount there, but still. And he's kind of gone back and forth here between American Hockey League, East Coast League, where his numbers are so-so. But, at the end of the day here, looks like he's played well enough to get another chance. But as we've talked about with some of these goalies that you look around the NHL, I wouldn't discard any of them until they're much later into their career. Like, he's still young enough that there's still a chance. I mean, look at Jordan Binnington in St. Louis, late bloomer there, went on to win a Stanley Cup. You got Jack Campbell, 10-0 right now with the Maple Leafs. He's 29 years old. He was a first-round pick 10, 11 years ago. And it took him all this time, to really get that opportunity. Now, of course, yes, he's played in the NHL. He had a couple decent seasons, and I stress decent, not fantastic, with the LA Kings before getting traded to Toronto. Last year in Toronto, his numbers were decent, not awesome, no, not like he's doing now. So, there's late blooming goaltenders. It happens a lot. So we'll see what happens here with Appleby. Difficult to say where things go, but he's getting a new contract, which is why he has to go through the waiver wire here today. We also have Nikita Gusev with the New Jersey Devils. Now, in case you may or may not recall, depending on how many videos of these you keep up with, but Gusev went through waivers, I think it was 9 or 10 days ago. Now, this time he's on waivers unconditionally for the purpose of a buyout. So him and the Devils have mutually agreed to terminate his contract. So obviously that's a big deal. I mean, he will become a free agent, assuming he clears, which is going to happen. I mean, he just went through this, like I said, not that long ago. Nobody's going to claim him at the salary he's making. But really, Gusev is a year away from being like a 44-point player. Things obviously fell off this year. The Devils are a young team going in a different direction. They're trying to get more and more opportunity for their young guys. He's obviously an older guy because he came over from the KHL. He's still not old, but he's certainly not fresh at a junior or anything of that nature. And Gusev is hoping to sign a new contract once everything clears with another team and play out the rest of the year somewhere else is kind of what the plan is here. So if he goes to a playoff team, then he can sign before the deadline is expired on Monday afternoon, and he will be eligible to play in the playoffs. So if a playoff team wants to sign him to like a league minimum contract for the rest of the season, which I would assume he'd probably be willing to do. At this point, if you're Nikita Gusev, you want to reprove yourself here. If a top team or a decent team that looks like there has any kind of a good shot at the playoffs want to sign you for league minimum, I think you probably take that. If there's no bites at all amongst the 16 to 18 teams that are fighting for playoff spots right now, maybe you go to a lesser team if you can get signed and just try to get your numbers up and hope for the best for a new contract for next year. But still, he could be found money for a team looking to make an acquisition here at the forward position. He can play with some better players in a different situation, some different coaching. And you know what? Maybe Nikita Gusev becomes a more productive player. If he can be the 40-point guy that he was last year, a lot of teams would probably love that for league minimum here for, the next 6 weeks. So I don't see there being any issues with him getting signed. It's just a matter of where he goes. But I'll look around all these teams that are looking to acquire forwards, and there's probably, 4, 5, 6 of them. Maybe they go to the route of signing Gusev for cheap without giving up anything. Something to consider, and it'd be interesting to see where he goes, and it could certainly impact teams' deadline plans, I would think, for sure. Now, we also have the Ottawa Senators placing center iceman Clarke Bishop on waivers. Now, Bishop's an interesting one. I was a little bit surprised because he's had a lot of opportunity here with Ottawa. But again, this is about roster flexibility. This isn't the fact that they don't like Clarke Bishop. He's gotten a lot of praise from the coaching staff. He's played well as a fourth-line center. They picked him up for practically nothing here earlier this season. So, he's been a nice found asset for them. They got him from the Hurricanes, I believe it was, when they traded Maxime Lajoie early in the season. He played for their American Hockey League team, did well down there, got the call up. And like I said, he's been a really solid bottom six guy, hardworking, good tight checking guy. Like, he deserves an opportunity, and I think he will continue to get it if he stays in Ottawa. To me, he's a cheap, easy fourth line center, for right now, at least on a short-term basis. And we'll see what happens. But ultimately, they need that flexibility. We know a lot of teams want to be able to put players on the taxi squad in between games. It saves them money, especially in the Canadian market where they have zero fans still. And Ottawa is notoriously a bit cheap with Eugene Melnyk, so obviously they need to be able to save as much as they can. So getting a guy to the taxi squad is important. And obviously once they play enough games, they have to go through this waivers procedure. So I don't think there's anything more to it than that from Bishop with the Senators, but you never know. They know that when they have to do this, they're at risk to lose him. It wouldn't be a shock if somebody picked up Bishop after watching him play in Ottawa and say, you know what, you could be our fourth line center for the playoffs. And again, could be a found money situation, but we'll see. The waivers have been hard to predict this year, but that's all your waivers news here for today. We'll likely be back with another video later discussing any potential trades or the latest rumors as we get closer to the deadline, as we're only now 4 days away. So let me know your thoughts on this news down in the comments, and we'll discuss further. If you're new to the channel, make sure you subscribe, stick around. We'll keep you up to date with all the latest news from the entire NHL. Thank you for watching, and I'll catch you next time.